What is going on there, gunfighters? A quick tack reload. I've gotten questions over the course of time on do an episode on zeroing. Well, I have. It's one of the very first Gunfighter Life episodes on zeroing, gun dope, B.Z.O, which stands for Battle Site Zero. Although I'm not as pretentious to think that everybody goes back and listens to every episode I've ever done. So, you're welcome. I'm going to rebroadcast it. Enjoy. What is going on, gunfighters? Saddle up for another episode of Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life where I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion. And West Coast Regional Rifle Champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Milito. Welcome to Gunfighter Life. Alright, gunfighters, on zeroing your rifle. So we're going to be talking about today, because I got a Patreon request about it. And I remember one of the very early episodes was about this. In fact, I just went back and checked, and it's episode number 4. Yeah, 4. Quite a while ago. So yeah, probably time to revisit it. And I didn't call it zeroing your gun. I called it gun dope and B.Z.O. So it's probably time to do that again. That being said, I cleaned up that audio. Even so, you'll be able to tell the difference. I might add that to the end of this episode, just for a nice throwback if you want to listen to it back to back. The first episode's not that long, so if you wanted to listen to this and then listen to that, you can. Or if you want to just shut this off when it gets to the end of this new episode, you can do that too. Let's talk about zeroing your gun. Sighting in your weapon, your whatever it is, most likely a rifle, but you could also use this for a pistol or a shotgun, whatever applies. The number one thing that I have on my checklist, and yes, I have a sighting in checklist. Pray, right? If you want a good outcome in anything, you should first pray about it, because all good things come from God. Some things you're also going to want: eyes and ears, the firearm, that goes without saying, I guess, the ammo. I'd say at least 40 rounds. That's if a center fire rifle, at least 2 full boxes. Don't get almost sighted in and then not have enough ammo. Now, it shouldn't take that long, but I've sighted in enough rifles to know that sometimes it does. Some kind of proper rest, a lead sled, a bag of shot, whatever that is for you. Good targets. I can't emphasize that enough. Good targets, preferably with some kind of square that are denoted in inches, because here in America we like to do things in inches, and a lot of the clicks on your optic, assuming you're using an optic, are going to be denoted in inches. For instance, quarter MOA clicks, which would equal a quarter inch roughly at 100 yards. Cleaning equipment, which you may or may not use, but you should probably have it. And then padding. Why padding? Well, depending on the caliber, you might want it for your shoulder. And also, even if you don't need it for the recoil management, it might come in handy to stop your heartbeat from interfering with the rifle moving. Let me start by saying I almost always zero my weapons at 50 yards. Almost always 50 yards zero. And this is not easy to do in audio only, but bullets never rise above the bore line. You can look at charts and you see them going up, and you think that means that they're rising. They're rising in relation to the earth because the barrel is pointed up away from the earth. You shot a laser outside the bore of that rifle going straight, that bullet is only ever going to drop from that line. The bullet goes up because you point it up. It still falls in relation to that bore line. Now, the sights are mounted above the barrel. If it's like a traditional rifle, let's say a Ruger 1022, they're very close to the barrel. If it's something like an AR with that inline buffer tube, the sights are mounted much higher than the barrel. This is something called height over bore. We might come back to that later. But for now, just realize that the sights are above the barrel, right? If you looked directly through those sights and those sights were directly in line with that bore, the barrel, if the sights and the barrel were directly in line, they would never cross, right? You would never ever shoot where you were aiming. They would always be lower, and they would just get lower and lower the further that bullet went down range. If that's an AR where the sights are, let's just say for the M16, 2.6 inches. You'd shoot 2.6 inches low at point blank range right in front of the muzzle, and it would only go lower and lower from there. Because of that, and I know that light is affected by gravity. You know, we learned that in Einstein's theory of relativity, but for the sake of argument, without getting super nerdy, as far as we're concerned and ranges that we can see, our vision, our line of sight, is not affected by gravity, but the bullet very much is. So what we want is to aim that bore up into the sights so that it crosses our line of sight as we're looking through those sights, so that it crosses. So if you think about this, your vision, your line of sight through those sights is a straight line to infinity. Again, gravity does affect light, but for this intents and purposes, it doesn't really practically. So you're looking in a straight line. That bullet is going to arch up and cross your line of sight once, and then it's going to cross it again. Real common one for the full-size M16, I think, is 36 yards. So it's going to cross it at 36 and then again at 300. And that's going to give your 300-meter B.Z.O. For the M4, it might be 25 meters or whatever, and get you on again at 300. You could zero your weapon at 25 meters if you want. You could zero it at 36 meters if you want. I like zeroing almost all my weapons at 3. I prefer a 50-yard zero. 50 yards, that's the first time my bullet is going to cross over that line of sight. And this varies from weapon to weapon. Like my Scar 17, I think it crosses it again right at about 220 yards. Which means that my max ordnance, the point that bullet's the highest in that arc, where it crosses the first time and it gets higher and higher, and then it comes back down on that same line. It'll cross it once at 50 and once at 220. Now, if I wanted a longer point blank range, if I wanted to push back where that second point was, I could make the first point closer because it's going to give me a higher arc, if that makes sense. If it crossed, and I'm just doing this out of my head, if I cross that at 25 meters, it might not cross again until 275 meters. That being said, I like the 50. It's generally referred to as 50, 250, 0. You shoot 0 at 50 and you'll be back on again somewhere around 250. Again, my Scar is 220. Really depends on the rifle that you're shooting and the ammo and all different things. But I like that because the max ordnance is not too high, right? You're not getting too high above the bore line. You do you zero for the distance that you want, but if you're looking here for wisdom and my recommendation, it's 50 meters. And why 50 meters on everything? Because I shoot a lot of different guns, I train on a lot of different guns, and I teach people that shoot a lot of different guns. And 50 is the best all around. Then I don't have to wonder, what is this rifle sighted in for? What is this handgun? Yes, I sight my handguns in. Yes, I zero my handguns at 50 yards as well. They're all sighted in 50 yards. I know that. You might say, well, why not sight them in for the longer distance? Why not sight them in at 200 yards or 250 yards? And I said there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, you're probably more accurate at that distance. It gives you a better idea of the actual zero of that gun at that distance. However, if you're talking about a tactical rifle or a hunting rifle, it's a lot easier to find a 50-yard range than it is to find a 250-yard range, especially, let's say, east of the Mississippi or wherever you're going to go hunting. You can usually find a 50-meter range, a 50-yard range. Finding a 250-yard range, not so easy. And if not that TSA would ever do this, but if they dropped your gun, your gun case got beat up in transit or whatever, you have to confirm zero, and you should confirm zero anyway. It's a lot easier to confirm zero and find a 50-yard range than a 250-yard range. That's the reason I can't think of a rifle or pistol that I have, or shotgun that I have that's not zeroed for that. Actually, my 20 gauge I think is zeroed at 25 meters. But almost everything that I have, there's an exception to everything, right? Almost every gun that I have is zeroed at 50 meters. Also makes it easy if I'm taking a couple of guns out to make sure they're still zeroed. My wife and I just did a trip across the country. I want to go out and confirm zero on a couple of rifles. I set up one target at 50 meters, or I set up one target stand at 50 meters and put up 3 or 4 different targets. And make sure my SCAR and my go-to AR and my handgun are all good to go, right? Anyway, I like a 50-yard zero, even on a hunting rifle. I know the old school way of thinking was 100 meters, and I've had that I worked for insist on 100-yard zero, and I'll do what they want, right, if they're the boss. But when I went to be a professional hunter and guide, the place that I went, long before I got there, they zeroed their guys at 50 yards, and I was thankful to see that. The old adage used to be an inch high at 100. Well, you know what? If you look at most practical rifles and you're zero at 50, it's pretty close to an inch high at 100. There's a reason for that old adage. It gives you the best shootability at practical hunting ranges. You're only going to be, out at 25 meters or 20 meters. The closest you're probably going to shoot a big game animal. Now, there are exceptions. You could get them really close, especially dangerous game. You're talking an inch or two difference, so you'll be an inch or two low there. You'll be dead on at 50. You'll be an inch and a half high at 100, 125, wherever your max ord is. And dead on again at 220, 250, whatever that is, depending on your cartridge and your rifle. But they're surprisingly similar. No matter what marketing would have you believe, inside 250 yards, for most modern rifle cartridges, they're dramatically similar. And the vast, vast majority of any big game animal is taken inside of 250 yards. So if I zero at 50, I can pretty much do that point blank. If you don't know, the point blank range means I can just put the front side of the reticle on the target and I don't have to adjust for anything, pull the trigger, and if I apply all my fundamentals right, then that meat goes from on the hoof to on my fork, or on somebody's fork, or whatever the case is. If you're shooting a coyote, probably not, right? But you get the idea. That's the point blank range. I can point at it and hit it without having to do any adjustments, any kind of clicking on a scope or anything like that. I like the 50-yard zero. Again, you want to choose a different one? Go ahead. That's totally fine. I'm going to go through the process, or some of the parts of the process of zeroing a rifle. You get your rifle, you take it out, you set it on the table, the bench, whatever. Check your mounts. Make sure they're solid. Make sure they're Loctited. If they're not, just put Loctite on them now. It's going to give you a lot less headache than if they come loose later. Just did an episode called Little Things. Don't buy a super expensive scope and a super expensive rifle and skimp on the 25 cents per screw of Loctite that you need to put on there. Blue Loctite, not red. I've learned that the hard way. But blue Loctite, well worth the money. Check your eye relief. If you're with somebody and they don't really know what they're doing, check their eye relief. You don't want them shooting that 30-06 with their eye, a half inch back from the scope. That's going to be a bad day. Just look at your buddy and laugh at him when he gets a cut on his eye. That's not cool. Make sure your eye relief is good. Make sure if the person didn't know what they were doing setting up that scope, or you don't know what you're doing, you know how to set for eye relief. You need to set the proper eye relief for that scope. If not, you're going to see a bunch of black in that scope, or you're going to get hit in the face with the scope. So set that proper eye relief. Check the scope, reticle, focus, and parallax. Make sure that's good. It's going to be hard to sight in if your reticle is not crystal clear, right? Take out your Sharpie or a pencil or that paint marker and mark the rings and the bases before you start shooting. Mark the screws, make sure they don't turn. Mark the bases and the scope, make sure they're not moving around. If somebody doesn't know what they're doing mounting a scope, a lot of times see stuff in there shift. You're never going to get a good zero if stuff in there is moving around. This is not really a scope mounting episode, so I don't want to go into that, but make sure that's done properly. Proper torque, don't over torque it, don't under torque it. Use an actual torque wrench when you can. Anyway, mark everything so that you know if it moves, and if it does move, you know where to put it back to. Especially if it's a new rifle, clean the bore, run a bore snake through it. Don't just assume the bore is clean. A lot of times there might be stuff in there. So check it, pull it through, make sure there's no grease in there, make sure there's no metal shavings and things like that in there. That can happen on a new rifle. New or old rifle, it's a good idea to make sure it's clean, and maybe not a bad idea anyway to pass a bore snake through it. I'm briefly going to mention barrel break-in. If it's a brand new gun, you might want to do that. I like to do it on my rifles. I'm not going to give you an exact formula for that, but you might want to shoot around, clean it, and continue on with the barrel break-in process. It helps if you have a spotter for this, but you don't need one. A lot of times you might not have one. But have a large target, a large sheet of paper. It's worth it to go spend $1.50 on a big piece of cardboard, a big cardboard target, a big, what are those like bright colored construction paper things they have at Walmart that are probably less than $1. Those pay for themselves real quick if you start using a normal size sheet of paper or a tiny target and you can't figure out where your rounds are going. So get a big one. Usually at 50 yards, if you mounted everything properly, the first shot should be somewhere on that paper. Then you got to look at your adjustments and your clicks. Make sure you're adjusting in the right way. And they're marked all different ways on different scopes, and some go clockwise to adjust one way and counterclockwise for another way. Some are half MOA clicks, some are quarter MOA clicks. Know your scope. That's why I said hopefully you have a target with some kind of ring and reference on there. And most of those are going to be denoted at 100 yards or 100 meters, whatever. And realize I'm just going to use 1-inch clicks. They're probably not going to be 1-inch clicks, but just to help you understand this is a good round number. If it's 100 yards is what it's based on, and each click moves me 1 inch at 100 yards, how far is that going to move me at 200 yards? Going to move me twice as much, right? 2 inches. If I cut that in half to 50, it's going to move me half as much, a half an inch. You do this math in your head. I don't want to keep going over and make it more confusing because it's an audio. But anyway, it's a good idea to mark that target. If you can see the holes in the paper, a little pro tip, get an identical target and sit it next to you on the bench. Then mark it on the target next to you where you hit it so that when you shoot the next one, you can have a point of reference. And every time you shoot, mark it on the target. If you do have to walk up to the target, then make sure you mark your old holes. Nothing's more frustrating than shooting a couple of rounds and going up and be like, was that the last one? Was that the first one? I don't really remember. I thought I would, but now I don't. So have a way to know which rounds you've already fired and which round was the last round that you fired. And do the proper adjustments to get closer to the center of that target until that gun is zeroed for you for that distance. One thing I will encourage you to do is after it's zeroed, get off the bench. Practice shooting, whether it's hunting or tactically. Doesn't really matter if that gun can shoot a half inch, whether it's an AR or a 300 Win Mag. If you've only ever shot off a bench, because you're probably not getting in a gunfight off a bench. You're probably not seeing that public land elk off a bench. Practice shooting with a hasty sling, standing, kneeling, sitting, prone. That's important. It is super important to zero your rifle. It's also important to know how to shoot places other than on a bench. Anyway, with that, I think that's going to be a good rundown on zeroing your weapon, zeroing your rifle, whatever it is. Tactical tip: don't trust the data or the BDC reticle or whatever it is on your scope, on your optic, whatever the book says. You have to test it. If that ballistic reticle is supposed to match up and it's supposed to shoot a certain place at 500 yards, you don't know that it's going to shoot at that place no matter what anybody says until you actually do it. If it's a tactical gun, you owe it to yourself to be that proficient. If it's a hunting gun, you owe it to that animal to actually test that before you just randomly throw rounds downrange at 500 yards. Whatever the reticle says, whatever the manufacturer says, lots of things can affect that. Barrel length, just different rifles on different days manufactured at the same model can produce different velocities on the same ammo. You have to know that. So just because it says if you zero it at this distance, it's going to line up at this, and this distance, in my experience, it's more often that they don't than they actually do. Not everything can be solved by clicking a button on Amazon. I should probably do a whole episode on that. But you can't buy your way out of that. You have to test it and make sure that it's going to shoot at that distance. Don't just assume that if you zero it for this distance, if the book says that I can do 25 clicks at 600 meters, that's going to be what I click and I'm going to be good. You have to test that out for yourself. And that's the tactical tip of the day. Actually test it at the actual distance with the actual ammo you're going to use. The tactical verse of the day I thought of when thinking about this episode. The horse is prepared for the day of battle, but deliverance is of the Lord. Well, victory comes from the Lord. It's up to you to be prepared. It's up to you to be ready. The horse is prepared for the day of battle. The victory is the Lord's. God delivered Noah and the 8. He destroyed the earth in the flood. But he didn't build the ark for Noah. Noah had to build the ark. Noah had to get prepared. Be ready. Be solid. Likewise, you. Be ready. Having a zeroed weapon is part of that. I hope you enjoyed this newer episode. As I alluded to in the beginning, I will add in the older episode if you want to listen to it. If not, you can stop now. I am humbled that you give me some of your time, so I just want to thank you for that. Announcement for listeners. I'm going to try something new on the podcast. It's important to look at oneself soberly, circumspectly, see what one could do better. I think it's fair to say, by most measures, I put out quite a bit of content. A lot of podcasters do once a week. I've been doing, at least on weekdays, daily shows for quite a while, putting those out. And the podcast has grown, and I'm very blessed by that. But on things I could do better, things I could improve, I thought mistakenly that if I just grew the podcast and listenership, that percentage of people that became patrons would grow. That doesn't seem to be the case, although I'm very blessed and have gotten a few more patrons. It has not grown in direct proportion. I have, cashed out retirement accounts, took on another job, private security contracting, which makes quite a bit more money than the podcast. But if I want the podcast to grow, if I want it to make enough money that one day and make it the primary source of income, I should do something different. So here's the idea. Hopefully, put out at least one new episode a week on the general podcast platforms. Now, there may be more, but one a week. Because I think there's a substantial portion out there that thinks if I can get an episode every day for free, why would I go and pay for it? Fair. So, we're going to try this at least for a while and see if it helps. Now, if you're a fairly new listener, there's episodes on the major podcast platforms that go back to 2019. There's a lot of content. So, if you're a new listener, that shouldn't be an issue for a while. If you go back and listen to all those episodes and you want more, then hopefully you consider the podcast being worth something to you. I don't expect you to work for free. It is written, "You shall not muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain, and a laborer is worthy of his wages." I don't expect you to, fix my car for free, or I don't have grass. I live as a nomad, but if I did, I wouldn't expect you to come cut my grass for free. So if you think the podcast is worth something worth supporting, you want the greater amount of content, go to Patreon. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. And I shouldn't assume that you know what Patreon is. Patreon is a crowdsource funding way to support somebody that you care about their content. Sign up for a monthly amount. You can sign up for $5. You can sign up for more. And you'll get access not just to the new stuff, but all the old stuff too. And there's a lot of content on there. As of the time of this recording, there's over 1,300 posts on Patreon. There's a lot of content on there that's only for patrons. Some of that is Patreon-only episodes. Some of that is... which, by the way, is commercial-free. So if you're tired of those, that might be worth a few bucks right there. Some of it is written content. Some of it is photo. Some of it is video. If you're already on Patreon, you already know about it. It's Good Shepherd Training on Patreon. You should recognize it when you see it. If you do not want to become a monthly subscriber, you don't like monthly subscriptions, there's a small subset to whom that is the case. I will put many episodes on there a la carte. There is a shop on there. You can go buy an episode. Pick and choose, like this episode looks good. You can purchase that episode and listen to it. There's other things on there as well, but if you just want an episode, if you want to see what's new, announcement because it's been a while, or you're used to a new episode every day, go there and check try out. Something go to Patreon new on the podcast. You don't have to put in your credit card or anything to check out Patreon. Soberly, circumspectly, and you can do a one-time thing if you don't want to do a monthly purchase. I think it's fair to say try that for a while. I put out quite a bit of content. Hopefully, it drives up the number of patrons. I've been doing at least on weekdays daily shows there for quite a while, putting those out. Scroll down and hit that Patreon. The podcast has grown, and I'm very blessed by that. But on today's things I could do better, things I could improve. The B.Z.O. or gun dope. I thought mistakenly that if I just grew the podcast and listenership, that percentage of people that became patrons dope is basically the that doesn't seem to be the case. How your rifle or your pistol is zero. I've gotten a few more patrons. Zero means that has not grown the point of aim, in direct proportion. Where you're actually pointing the weapon and the point of impact where the bullet actually hits. Took on another job, private security contracting, which makes quite a bit more money than the podcast. But if I want the podcast to grow, if I want it to make enough money that one day and make it the primary source of income, I should do something different. So here's the idea. That's what going to be entitled this episode. Hopefully, either one of those two put out at least one new episode. We're going to roughly be talking about what that is, how to get that, best practices, platforms. Just a little bit. Now there may be more, the intro. If you are a professional gunfighter, some of the stuff you may know. Some of the stuff, even if you are, there's a substantial portion out there that I've learned thinks if I can get an episode every day for free, why would I go and pay for it? We'll start out with some basics. So, I'm going to tell you to start out if you're going to zero your rifle or your pistol, but I'll talk mostly about rifle. Now, if you're a fairly new listener, there's episodes on the major podcast platforms that go back to 2019. First and foremost, there's a lot of get your fundamentals down. If you're a new listener, the basics, the fundamentals, that shouldn't be an issue for a while. I've been doing this for years. You go back and listen to all those episodes, won a bunch of different high-level competitions. I've done this a lot. Hopefully you consider I always go back to the basics, always practice, always dry fire. I don't expect you to work for free. It is written, you shall not muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain, and a laborer is worthy of his wages. Before you go out and do anything, I don't expect you to fix my car for free, or I don't have grass, I live as a nomad, but if I did, I wouldn't expect you to come cut my grass for free. Means no live ammunition, you still follow all your safety rules, still keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire, still always keep your weapon pointed in the safe direction, greater amount of content, go to Patreon. Know its background. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. If you shoot yourself or somebody else, and I shouldn't assume that you know what Patreon is. Patreon is a practice your trigger control. Get it so that when crowdsource funding way to support somebody that you care about their content. Sign up for a monthly amount. Get that for $5. Because no matter how great equipment you have, if you can't do that, you'll get access not just to the new stuff, but all the old stuff too. And there's a lot of content. Putting your head in the same place, your finger as of the time of this recording. Once you get those, there's over 1,300 posts on Patreon. There's a lot of content on there that's only for patrons. You're doing it right, and the weapon. Some of that is Patreon only episodes. Start with the software skills before you worry about the hardware. Which, by the way, is commercial free. So if you're tired of those, that might be worth a few bucks right there. Some of it is written content.
That gun will only ever shoot as good as you can shoot it.
Some of it is photo. Some of it is video.
Doesn't really matter if you have a rifle.
If you're already on Patreon, you already know about it. It's Good Shepherd Training on Patreon. You should recognize it when you see it.
So start there. Once you have that, you're going to need a few things to zero your weapon.
Want to become a monthly subscriber, you don't like monthly subscriptions,
so you're going to need some kind
there's a small subset
you need
to
a
whom
rifle.
That is the case.
You're probably going to
I
have
will put
your sighting,
many episodes
a sighting system, whether
on
that's
there
iron
a la
sights or
carte.
optics
There's
or both.
a shop on there.
So make sure
you
those are
locked,
tighted down, make sure they're tight.
Pick and
if
choose
you don't
like
know the
this
proper
episode
torque and
looks
stuff,
good.
whatever manufacturer it is,
look
it up or write them. They'll tell you. They'll let you know. Go
There's
with their
other things on there as well, but if you just want an episode, if you want to see what's new,
so get that all squared away, get it
been a while, or you're used to a new episode every day, go there and check out, go to Patreon.
Your optic put on, and you go
don't
out
have
to
to
the
put in your
range,
credit card or anything to check out Patreon.
You can't see through your scope,
or
you can only see through
it a little bit
because
you don't want to do a
eye
monthly
relief isn't right. So
I'm going to try that for a while.
You go out.
See how it works.
Get everything
Hopefully
locked,
it drives
down,
up
nothing sucks, and
the
get
number
your
of
weapons
patrons.
zeroed, and then
I really
start seeing
hope
rounds go everywhere, and you realize that your optic's loose, your iron sights are loose.
So scroll down and hit that
make
Patreon
sure that is squared
link
away.
In the show notes.
Square away that. You're going to need that Loctite. You're going to need whatever it is to mount your optic, your weapon, your iron sights. That being said, if you are going to zero, make sure you zero your iron sights first and then your optic. There's a couple ways to do that if you can co-witness. We'll get into that later. Some things you're also going to need. You're also going to need some kind of rest, hopefully. You can do it without it. You can do just a hasty B.Z.O. Battle Sight Zero, just getting in the prone. But even if you're really, really good, you'll still be better with a rest. You have a human body. The human body moves and breathes, and it's not perfect. So if you can get that rest, if you can get a commercial rest, a lead sled is probably best. Some other kind of rest, you can use an improvised rest. I'll tell you a quick, easy little hack here for a rest. Take an old pair of pants. Get some kind of, take an old pair of pants, cut off the pant legs. You take a zip tie. You either just fill the pants or get some kind of plastic bag or a Walmart bag, double it up, and you fill that bag with some kind of bag or bags, depending on the size that you're trying to get. Fill that bag or bag up with rice or lentils or beans or even sand if that's all you have. I don't like sand because if it does bust loose, it makes a big mess. Oatmeal, anything like that. Anything that's going to make a good, stable shooting rest. Fill that pant leg up and then put a zip tie on the other side. So there you got it. And that's pretty much your sandbag rest. Very stable. You might want to make 1 to 3 of those, depending. You can use 1 or 2 in the front and then 1 in the back. Try to have as little of your influence on it as possible. So there we go. You got your rest. You're going to need that. Obviously, you're going to need all your basic range equipment, eyes and ears and everything. You're going to need whatever tool you need to adjust your sights and your optics. Don't, make the mistake of being out there and trying to adjust a very common example, adjust your AR-15 front sight with no tools. It's a pain in the butt. Have the right tools before you go out. Have them set up in a little kit. That way you don't have to waste time looking for them. So get everything ready for your zero. Alright, so now you're all ready for your range trip. Let's talk about zeroing. We'll talk about this in a couple of different principles. You're going to have to realize is height over bore. A couple of basic principles. When you look on charts and stuff, it may look like the bullet is going up, and it is going up because you point the barrel up, but realize all the bullet ever does when it exits that barrel is fall. The reason it looks like it's rising is because we have what's called height over bore. Your sights are higher than your bore line, and those two things cross. So if you kind of picture this in your head or look up a chart, you're looking straight. For all intents and purposes, light doesn't bend, at least here on Earth as far as we can perceive it with the human eye. So your line of sight is straight. You look straight through your sights. Your bore is oriented up. So the bullet comes up and it crosses your line of sight once, rising, and then gravity obviously takes it down. After it hits max ord, the highest it'll rise above the bore line, it falls again and crosses over twice. So the bullet and your line of sight aren't the same all the time. That would be impossible. That would only be possible if there was no gravity. So it's going to cross twice. And with most modern sporting rifles, your AR-15s, whatever you want to refer to those as, your AK-47s, you have a pretty significant height over bore, which means that it's going to cross over once and then twice. you can zero your weapon for the first one or the second one. Realize that for most things, unless you have a very low height over bore and you're zeroing it far away, like a 100-yard zero for a hunting rifle with a very little height over bore, you're gonna have two where it crosses over once rising your line of sight and crosses over again when it's falling back into your line of sight. A very common distance for your AR-15s, for your modern sporting rifles like that, is going to be a 50 and a 250, or a 25 and a 300. So with a 25-300, you have kind of a bigger arc, so it crosses over once at the 25, it rises pretty steeply, and it falls back again at the 300. You have a higher, what's called max ordnance. So in your middle, let's say when that bullet rises the most, you'll have a bigger gap there. But you have a longer distance before it crosses over again, so a farther distance to where you have to hold over, so you don't have to hold over again for a farther range. And that's up to you if you want to do it like that. So you have that. Now you can do whatever you want. I'll let you know that I use the 50-250, and that's a rough estimate. You got to check that for yourself. A lot of people put that out there like it's a fact, but that may depend on your rifle. But I like the 50-250. It crosses over your line of sight first at 50 meters and then again about 250 meters. And like I said, that depends on a lot of different things. Your barrel length, your velocity, your ammunition, your height over bore. It's not the same for every rifle. It's not the same for every optics mount. It's not the same for every optic. So all that stuff makes a difference. You got to double check this, but these are just rough things. So generally accepted that a 50 meter zero for your rifle is good. Even for your hunting rifle, there's the old adage that inch high at 100. So if you're sighting in your hunting rifle, you have a little bit lower height over bore because the stock actually drops on like an AR-15 or other modern sporting rifles. So the inch high at 100, if you look at the numbers, it's pretty close to the same as a 50-yard zero. So, like I said, always verify this, but the 50-yard zero is what I prefer. So get what distance you're going to zero your rifle at. For my primary battle rifle, my Scar 17, it's a little bit different. It's, for whatever reason, it's zeroed at 50 and it's zeroed again at about 230 yards. So there's that. But that I know that zero on that weapon, and that's what it is. You need to know the zero for your weapon. So get down, get in that good, solid position. Do your dry firing so you're not wasting ammo, getting crappy groups. Make sure your gun doesn't move when you squeeze that trigger nice and slow. And then fire a group of 3 to 4 rounds. That's really up to you. You may even want to do your first 1 or 2 rounds at a very close distance, 10, 15 yards. Because if you put it at a far distance and you're completely not on paper, then you just wasted those rounds. You might do it at a closer distance and realize that you need to be a little bit higher than your target, a couple inches at 15 yards, and then push it back to 50, and at least it's on paper. One little thing I'll tell you when you go to adjust your iron sights or your optics, I've learned this the hard way many times. I have to relearn it sometimes because I'm hard-headed. But don't try to overcorrect. Do less than what you think you need to, because nothing's worse than, you're a couple inches to the left and you crank that sight over, now you're a couple inches to the right, and you move it back and you're too far to the left. Get a safe judgment and click it over. Let's say you're 3 inches right, click it over a little bit to the left, and then shoot again. That way you walk it in, and then you're not way off one side and then way off to the other side because you overcorrected. So don't make that mistake if you can help it. Get those zeroed. Like I said, zero your iron sights first. And all weapons are different, so I won't get into exactly how to do that. You can look that up. But once your iron sights are zeroed, then you can take if you can co-witness, you can take your red dot. This works with a pistol or a rifle. You can take your red dot, look through your sights, look through your rear sight aperture and your front sight, and put that dot right on the top of that front sight, looking through your rear sight, and then you zero it. Keep doing that. You don't have to fire a shot. Once it's zeroed on your iron sights, you shoot and confirm the zero of your optic, and it should be pretty close to dead on. You fold those sights down, and then you confirm that zero. Always confirm your zero. A good practice is you get that zero, you got that rifle where you want it, You stand up, you walk around, you get back in position, you shoot a confirmation zero, make sure that you weren't doing something crazy when you zeroed it. Make sure it shoots in the same place. Once it's all zeroed, then that's your battle site zero. The next part of the zeroing process is making a dope card. So write down, what the distance is that you zeroed it for. You may be like, I don't need to do that, but if something happens and you switch rifles and you come back to that rifle a few months later, you may forget. You may forget what distance you zeroed it for. You may forget what ammo you had in it. That makes a huge difference. You zero your 5.56 with 62 grain and you buy some cheap 55 grain at Walmart, it's not going to be the same zero. You need to remember what you zeroed it for, when you zeroed it, the ammunition that you zeroed it. So write all that down on your dope card. I even like to draw a diagram. I draw what the sights look like. I draw what the target looks like. I draw what my point of aim, point of impact looks like. At 50 meters, at 250 meters, whatever it is. I write that down. I write that information down. That way, the next time I go out, I know what it is. Even if I don't have the chance to shoot, I can go back and look at that card before a mission, before I put boots on the ground. I can look at that real quick and be like, okay. And we'll expand on that. Once you know that zero, you can also write on that card, okay, I know at 300, 400 yards, this is where I have to hold. And then you can draw that. Actually, people make fun of Marines for like crayons, but actually take some crayons, colored pencils, pens, whatever, draw on a card so that you know what that is and study it. That way you have to do less in the actual moment. You don't really have to think. Your body will just automatically, your brain will automatically be like, oh, that looks like 350 yards. I've already range find it. It's on my range card. I know what I have to hold over at that distance. You already know it. Conversely, do it at the close distances too, especially for a battle weapon. A lot of stuff happens up close. A lot of people make the mistake of, especially under stress, shooting exactly where they want the bullet to go. But that doesn't work, say, on an AR if you're shooting a headshot at 7 yards. If you aim for the center of the head, you're going to miss the head because, like we talked about, that height over bore. You have to aim somewhere else. You may even have to aim off the target, off the head, to hit dead center in the head. You need to know what that is. You need to be familiar with that. You need to practice that. You need to draw that on your diagram. So know that. Be familiar with that. Know that at 7 yards, at 15 yards, at arm's length distance where you have to aim. You may not think you have to aim at those distances, but you do. Now, once you've got all that information recorded, I would encourage you to make a copy of it. I would encourage you to keep one on the rifle. Take that little piece of paper, roll it up, put it in the pistol grip, put it in the butt stock. Another good tip, if you don't want to do that, is actually write it on the gun. Take a pencil or one of those paint markers if you're not one of the people that treat your guns like a Barbie doll, and just write on it. Write on the sling if you want. Take the sling and write on it. It's zeroed at 50 yards and you get 250 yards. Write your dope on it. At 350 yards, they have to hold, 6 inches high. Whatever your dope is, go ahead and write it on the gun itself. Write it on the scope mounts with a pencil. Write it on the sling. Write it on the stock. Do whatever you need to do. Even draw a little diagram if you want with a pencil, on the top of your scope cover. This is my dope. This is what it's zeroed for. This is my sight picture. That way when you pick up that rifle and you're waiting for something to happen, you can look at it. It's reassuring. Okay, I know that this is the deal. And that's it. And that the dope is very important. Now, that being said, you can do the same thing with a pistol. You can, first of all, you have to get your fundamentals down with a pistol. If you're shooting a 6-inch group at, 10 meters, 10 yards, then, zeroing your pistol is not going to do a whole lot of good. Once you get your fundamentals down and you can get those good tight groups, the same thing applies. That bullet also covers your bore line twice in the pistol, a lot of times at like 7 yards and then at 25 yards. You also have to understand the difference between the two different kinds of pistol sights. You got what's called a 6 o'clock hold and a combat hold. And it depends on your pistol and your sights. A Glock with a factory set of sights will shoot at 6 o'clock, meaning that bullet will hit at the top of the front sight. A lot of other guns, like an M&P, is designed to hit where the dot is in the middle of the front sight. I'm not going to say one's better than the other. That's really up to you. It's like the 25 meter zero versus the 50 meter zero. I personally like the combat hold. I like the bullet to hit exactly where that dot is. I like to put the front dot of the front sight on my target and hit it. Some people don't like that. There are advantages to the 6 o'clock hold, but you can do the same thing with a pistol. Is your pistol with that ammunition can make a huge difference, especially with a tilting barrel design like a Glock or most modern pistols. Your velocity, your bullet weight can make a huge difference, especially out to like 25, 50 meters. And, 50 meters is pistol distance if you're good enough to do it easily. The point of aim, point of impact can be a huge difference. Does your gun shoot where you're aiming at? Does your pistol shoot point of aim, point of impact at 25 yards, at 50 yards, at 7 yards? And a lot of times there's offsets for those. You need to know those. The same thing, write the dope down, write it down in your pistol case, write it down on a little piece of paper, shove it in the back of your pistol grip. Do what you got to do to know that dope. Take a pencil and write it on your gun. It is what it is. Write down what your duty load is. Make sure you zero it with your duty load. If you practice with 115 grain, crappy, the cheapest you can find ammo, and then you shoot a 147 or 124 plus B duty round, odds are, unless you're shooting like a Beretta where the barrel doesn't tilt, you're going to have a giant swing in point of aim, point of impact. You need to zero your gun with the duty rounds. If your duty rounds are so expensive you're not willing to do that, then either buck up and spend some more money or get some different duty rounds. But you need to do that with the rounds you're going to trust your life with, because they don't shoot in the same place. Sometimes they'll be wildly off at like 25 yards. They'll be 6 to 8 inches off, which if you have to take a fine shot if somebody's halfway behind cover, that's a big difference. You need to know, not even know, you need to have your gun dialed in so that when you point that front sight at your target, assuming you ever do everything right, which is hard enough in a gunfight, that your bullet's going to hit where you want it to hit. So zeroing, we think a lot of with the rifle, but it also applies with the pistol. We'll touch real briefly on the shotgun. Now, yes, you do still have to B.Z.O or zero a shotgun, both for hunting and for defense. Doesn't have to be as scientific, but if you're going to zero it for hunting, you ought to get something the size of what you are planning on hunting, with the load you're planning on hunting with. Let's say if you're planning on hunting rabbits, get a target, or actually get a target with a rabbit on it, or get a target roughly the same size as the vital zone on a rabbit. Get your, let's say, number 6 shot high brass, federal load, whatever you're going to choose. Put it out and shoot at it from the different distances and find out the distance that you can be away and still put enough solid pellets on that target to get a consistent hit every time. If you're going to hunt, you should be ethical. You owe it to that animal to take it out cleanly. So a very simple way to zero your shotgun. Not all loads will shoot the same out of every shotgun, out of every choke. Those things you see about, a full choke is good out to 40 yards. That depends on your shotgun and your load and a lot of different things. Also, shotguns, just like rifles, they have to be zeroed. Some pattern high, some pattern low, some pattern right, some pattern left. So that just depends. You really have to know that about your shotgun. Same with defensive loads. Get, your standard target and pattern it with, if you got a defensive shotgun with no chokes, or with whatever kind of choke you're going to have in it. And if you don't know about chokes, that's not something to cover in this episode, but take whatever you're planning on using and figure out what distances it's still good at. Does it pattern high? Does it pattern low? At what distance do you start putting pellets off of that target to make it unsafe in which to take that shot? Or to know you can only take that shot if you have a completely safe backstop, because some of those pellets are going to go outside your target. You should know that about your shotgun. If your shotgun has adjustable sights, then it's the same thing if you have a rifle type sight or an optical type sight. Know that. And adjust your sights for your shotgun for that load, especially if it's slugs. You need to know. Don't just assume because it's a shotgun that it's going to be okay. You still have to zero your shotgun, especially even if it doesn't just have a vent rib sight without adjustable sights. You still need to know that your load is going to hit with that sight at that distance. So you have to zero your shotgun as well. That's all we'll cover today, I think, for zeroing and B.Z.O.ing. Like I said, those quick tips: get a good stable rest. Make sure that you dry fire beforehand to make sure that your form is good, because your rifle's not going to shoot good if you can't shoot it good. It's not magic. You have to make the rounds go. They're not going to go there just because you really, really want them to. You have to put rounds in the bullseye. You have to do that. So make sure that you have done your part. It's not all about the gear. Make sure you have the tools and equipment necessary to adjust your iron sights or your optics. Make sure that you understand how your optic works, that it's mounted properly. Make sure that it's all Loctited up. Make sure that you understand the trajectory of your round. Make sure you know what distance you're going to zero it at and why. That's about all I'll say today for the B.Z.O. and the Battle Sight Zero and your gun dope. Thanks for listening to another episode of Gunfighter Life. Thank you, and have a blessed day.